Hello and welcome to Addicted to Lacrosse. This is January the 20th, 2014, and have a bit of an administrative thing to do before we get started. I'm going to call this episode 1.4. The last episode was 1.2, so we're going to skip 1.3, only because I started the first episode calling it 1.0, and that's just because I'm a software guy and that's what we do. But it makes more sense to have this be episode 1.4 since it is their fourth episode and we're talking about week 4 of the NLL. So let's get 1.4 started. Before I forget, my name is Graham Parrow, as you can see on screen. And with me, as always, is Tyler Fitch. And welcome back from Las Vegas, Melissa Daphne. Okay, Melissa had a couple things in the show notes to start off with. She wanted to talk about goalie interference. Melissa, what's up with that?
You know, it was one of those things in previous games. I feel like that was called if a player just got too close to a goalie, and I've noticed several games now where the goalie is getting straight up plowed into, not just pushed from behind or something, and it's not being called. So it was one of those things that I'm kind of wondering what's going on. According to the rule book, a crease violation occurs when contact is made between the attacking player and or stick and goaltender, which some of them aren't even being called as crease violations.
Yeah, it seems to be subjective. It's if a guy dives in and gets a goal and ends up touching the goalie afterwards, if it's like a touch, they just say, well, he scored the goal and that's the way it went out. But if the rule says you touch him, you interfered, you don't see it called that strictly.
Yeah, there's definitely been a few games, and I know most recently this weekend with the Mammoth, Ward got ran into several times. A couple times he was pushed, but he was just plain ran into, and once he stepped into him. And there wasn't a single call. And that wasn't the only game. That's just the one that's freshest on my mind. But it really seems that they've really pulled back on what they're calling when it comes to the goaltender this season. It seems very strange. I have a feeling we're going to start seeing some injured goalies if this continues.
Well, certainly nobody wants to see any injuries. I haven't noticed. I did notice in the Colorado game that the goalie got hit a couple of times. And I think there's something in the rule book now. It may be more to do with whether a goal counts or not. But there are some rules that say if a guy runs into the goalie and it's due to his momentum going through the crease, then that's okay. Obviously, if he makes an effort to hit the goalie, that's no good at all. But it may have something to do with whether he really had any chance at all to change his direction.
Yeah, it's definitely interesting to me. It just, like I said, previous seasons it seems like a player just practically looked funny at the goalie and they'd get called for goalie interference or a crease or something. And this season it seems like they're getting a lot more contact directly onto the goalie, not into the goalie stick or just even being pushed. They're just getting into him with them, and nothing's being called. So. But maybe it's just since this weekend was fresh and seeing so many. But I remember seeing a game last weekend when I was watching them that I felt like there was a couple times something should have been called that wasn't. And not in one of the Mammoth games. Was it the Philly game? No, come to me. So now watch. You guys are really going to be paying attention every time somebody crashes the net. Because it's not even like on the diving shots. I mean, those are one things that you kind of expect there's going to be some contact. But it just really seems like they're almost intentionally making contact with the goalie right now.
Okay, one of the other things I neglected to mention at the top of the show is that we have the Q&A app running on Google+. So if you are watching live and you want to ask us a question, head on over to the Google Plus page, and you should be able to ask us a question there, and we will get notified of that, and we will address your question. The other thing, excuse me, that Melissa wanted to talk about was Airgate, and presumably having Drew Westerveld on your team, you're seeing an awful lot of those. I'm wondering. I think I tweeted on Sunday how long it's going to be before we start calling those Air Westies.
He is definitely doing a lot of them, and I gotta say, the few that I've seen him do have just been gorgeous. They've been textbook, just perfect. But even in the other games I watched this weekend, it seems like the air gates are really prominent right now in this part of the season. I felt like last season you'd see them occasionally. It was a move that might be attempted, but it seems like this season that's kind of becoming the go-to move. I was wondering what you guys thought.
There was one play in the Toronto-Rochester game, and I'm trying to remember who it was. It was one of the Rock players. I don't think it was Doyle. Doyle's like 6'2" or something, so you can kind of see him doing it. But it was one of the smaller players, and I think he came around behind the net, and it looks like he thought about doing it and then realized, wait a minute, I'm only 5'8", I can't do this. And then he stopped and ended up doing something else. But it looked like he was really considering it. And I'm wondering if that was sort of what you're talking about, that it's coming up a lot more. And so everybody's now thinking, this is it's not one of these really weird plays that you see every now and again. It's becoming just another way of scoring goals. And so everybody's thinking about doing it.
Well, I know in the mini Philly games there was several. Sorry, Tyler.
That's fine.
It's certainly easy for Drew Westervelt to do it when your arms are 8 feet long. Then that's certainly another alternative.
Yeah, I think it's related to the rule change where it was banned until a few years ago. You had to be in front of the crease to score, and they've lifted that, and guys have adjusted their game and to the point where they can see the opportunities coming a lot sooner and less spur of the moment and practically planned. Where last year's playoff game of stealth at Calgary, Curtis Dixon's seventh goal, he was parked behind the crease and he just caught it and dunked it. He was set up from behind. It wasn't even like a whole run and dodge and dunk it. So their teams are adjusting to it being allowed, and players are just more used to it now.
That does seem to be something that Nick Rose doesn't seem to like much. He seemed to have a lot of those goals scored on him last year, and there was one game where I think somebody scored on him that way early in the game. Later in the game, he managed to get pulled, and Zach Boychuk came in. I blanked on his name for a second. And then somebody tried it later in the game, and Boychuk was, as soon as the guy went behind him, Boychuk went up and put his arm just across the top of the net. And as soon as he tried it, basically lifted his arm up and prevented it. And I remember thinking, why can't you teach Nick Rose that? Because he's getting nailed on these things all the time.
Yeah, Cosmo seemed to definitely be struggling with him a little bit, and maybe that's why it is so prominent, is the fact that I think I've seen Westervelt do 5 or 6 of them in the past few games, and then just watching the Philly the mini game, and there was at least 2, I think, goals, and then a few attempts. So it's just like, I feel like it's popping up a whole lot more than it did last season, and maybe that's why is they're just starting to get used to it, and they're practicing it more and seeing it as another tool versus kind of a fluke play.
And John Grant seems to be getting another tool in his chest. The play where he runs up to the side and then flips it around his back or under his legs or between his legs or something, as he did in the game I believe it was the game on Saturday. And that video is going crazy and all over YouTube and all over everywhere in lacrosse circles anyway.
The thing is, that's with his offhand. It's like he's dodging in and he sticks in his right hand. It looks great until you realize he's left-handed and he's still whipping a shot with his right hand. It's just incredible.
I think I'm in the minority on that one, and maybe it's because I've seen him already since he's been a Mammoth player do those plays several times, and several of them much cleaner, much nicer looking. That one I was less than impressed. I felt like it was really sloppy, but I mean, it's a cool play because it's kind of a little bit of a fluke, but I have seen him do it so many times already where it was clean, it looked very intentional, and it was just a perfect shot. It just happened to be between his legs or his and his defender's legs. That one I just thought looked sloppy, so it's surprising me that it's having such a fuss made out of this one, because they're one of the ones that Graham posted on Facebook actually looked as much better, in my opinion. But it
Yeah,
was still, it was a nice goal.
I found one that he had done last year that looked almost the same as this one. I mean, it was from the same angle. He had the defender behind him the same way, and I think in the one last year he actually went between his legs, whereas this one he kind of went behind him. But it was almost the same play. And that one was against Philly, I think.
Yeah, he does do it, and when it goes in, it's fantastic. But what can be very frustrating is it seems like sometimes those are the only plays he seems to score on. So he'll have 2 goals on 15 shots, and one of them is a fluke play, and one of them was a great play, and the rest he just can't seem to shoot anywhere near the goalie. So it's definitely a love-hate. But, highlight reel goals are always good for the sport. ESPN covers them, SportsCenter covers them, so can't complain too much.
Well, continuing with Mammoth news, I guess has been covered in a lot of places, and we were. I guess it happened after we recorded last week, so the fact that Melissa wasn't around didn't actually affect us too much. But I wanted to ask you about the signing of Ethan Iannucci.
I'm kind of torn. Before he got injured, he was phenomenal. I mean, he was definitely one of those players that just made you go, wow. Post, I'm not as much of a Nooch fan. It never sat with me right, his refusal to play for the Rush. I know I've definitely gotten heat for feeling that way about certain players, but I don't like that. This is a sport that really needs growth, and when you have a good player that just is sitting out for whatever reason, and I'm not a fan. And then, wasn't impressed with him on the South last year, and then they cut him, and wow, so the Mammoth signed him. We just have this habit of going for these players that, really are very on the fence. They could be great, they could have a really bad season. It's hard to say. We have so much talent already that, you look at around the league. I mean, when we were playing Buffalo, it was amazing looking at the roster and being like, oh, former Mammoth, former Stealth. It was like, I recognize so many of the Buffalo names, and they definitely made us pay for cutting them. We do this a lot. Things start getting rough. Govett does a shakeup, cuts a lot of good talent, brings in a lot of unknowns or has-beens, and so we'll see. His size definitely seemed to have a little bit of an impact in the Stealth game, and even in the Bandits game, but we'll see if it holds long term, in my opinion. What do you guys think? You've seen him play a little bit more probably than I have.
Yeah, with already having Drew Restovelt as a big 6-foot-plus righty, I don't see what Nooch adds to the offense there. That was a very interesting signing. Based on his history, he's going to demand a high-price contract compared to Jordan McBride, who's a second, third-year player. So it's like they're going to spend more to bring Nooch in and try to shake things up. He got shut out the first game. Second game, I think he had 2 goals, maybe more, but I only saw 2 for sure. And it was a very interesting choice. He's continuing long line of Stealth players who go to the Mammoth after they've been cut. And you have like Eric Martin. He did a half season there. Gary Rosiski did a season after he was done in San Jose, and Jim Moss. So it's like these guys who are really on the fence between true producer and just not going to mess up, and they'll do okay. And as soon as they're not a true producer, the Stealth they're cut their line, and the Mammoth come in and pick them up, and it hasn't worked out yet.
No, it definitely hasn't.
What surprised me even more than the Mammoth signing Iannucci, was who they gave up for him. As you said, they released Jordan McBride, and this is a week after not even a week, a few days after they released Jamie Lincoln. And they signed former Bandit Mike McNamara to replace Lincoln. And I remember a lot of people being surprised that McNamara was cut by the Bandits in the preseason. But I can see, as you said, Melissa, I can see Lincoln and McBride both being signed by somebody in the next little while, and that may, unless Nooch turns out to be a lot better than he has been so far. I mean, it's only 2 games. That may come back to bite him in the butt.
Well, as we've seen it with some of the teams, and you even see it, in football, that you'll have a player who, with one team, they're just kind of mediocre. They change teams, and all of a sudden, it's like a whole different player. So there's always that potential. Maybe that's the problem, is there's something in the Mammoth organization that just kind of tamps down some of the talent. I don't know. Maybe they just find a system they fit in better. Whoever's doing the assists and feeding them, things like that. It's hard to say, but I was definitely disappointed that we cut McBride. I was disappointed we cut Lincoln. I don't know much about McNamara. Unfortunately, since he is East Coast, I haven't seen him play nearly as much. But what I'm afraid of is that we're just doing Band-Aids, for the wrong thing.
Well, there were a lot of games last week, so let's get to those. Starting with Edmonton, Calgary. Edmonton took this one 15-8, and Calgary just was not in this game at all. I didn't see all of it. I saw bits of it. But Edmonton's starting to look now. As we were talking about before the show, I was just going to say Edmonton was starting to look scary good. They were getting great goaltending. They were getting great defense. Their offense is all over the place. Now, as we were talking about before the show, 2 of their 3 big wins have been against Colorado, and Colorado is not having the greatest season so far. The other one was against Calgary, obviously, in this one, and Calgary just didn't look very good at all. I meant to look at the stats before to see where the goals came from, and I don't remember offhand. Do you guys see this game at all?
I did watch parts of it.
Yeah, I also watched parts that started up before the stealth game. It's the rush defense is completely dominant when they set the tone. It's incredible to watch. It's scary when you're playing against them, but they can go out and push, and they're fearless. It's like they're going to attack you. And Calgary can score goals, and they put up 8, which means I think they found 8 opportunities versus creating whatever more they needed. They're incredible. The Edmonton defense.
Yeah, this was an interesting game. Maybe the Rush were fired up. Quinlan's jersey was retired beforehand, which it was sad to see how empty the stands were. But it was definitely one of those things that the Rush seemed like they were just clicking. They were on target. Their passes looked pretty smooth. Their movement was pretty good. The defense really kept Calgary away from the crease, which is always important. And then Calgary couldn't capitalize on the power play, and they gave Edmonton a lot of power play opportunities, and that really just isn't good. And it seemed like a lot of times they really just didn't know what they were doing in front of the crease, and they had really bad shot clock management. So they hadn't quite set up a play, and then there's a shot clock buzzer, and so they lose the ball again.
Looks like the Roughnecks managed 46 shots in the game. The Rush only got 51, so there wasn't an awful lot more, but obviously they were much better shots. And I was under the impression for some reason that, Mike Poulin did not have a great season last year, and I had the feeling that he would come back with a much stronger season this year, and that hasn't proven to be the case thus far. Looks like Matthews led the game in points with 7. He and Curtis Knight each had 4 goals. And Chris Corbeil had 3 goals and 2 assists, which is odd for a defender. And he's not even one of these quick transition kind of defenders. He's more of a defender who stays in the one side of the floor most of the time.
Yeah, I haven't seen him push the action up very often.
Okay, next game. I'm losing track of stuff here. Sorry. Next one was a really good one, and I imagine Tyler was a little more pleased with the outcome of this one than Melissa was. Vancouver 14, Colorado 13 in overtime. Vancouver never led in this game at all, which is odd, but happens now and again. They did tie it up 5 times, so if you were watching this game, just it was close all the way through. There was never a moment where you thought, okay, well, this one's over, or next goal means that this one's over, or anything. There was no question that it was going right down to the wire. Lewis Ratcliffe, Tyler mentioned him last week that he hasn't been too impressed with his play, but obviously looked okay in overtime.
Yeah, he had an incredible shot, really. He just took the stick angle as shot clock was expiring, put it right over Dylan Ward's foot. It was great placement. It was kind of those things where you need to get a shot on goal as it was expiring and maybe get a rebound, get some sort of unsettled situation, but he got the goal, and it was great. Just moments before, Colorado had a goal called back on a play that initially was called a non-goal by the ref. They went to replay because it was OT, it was automatic replay, and they couldn't overturn it clearly, so they had to stick with the call of a non-goal. It was as close as could be, but there was no clear shot of the ball crossing the line versus when Adam Jones' hands were hitting the ground, and they couldn't clearly overturn it, so they had to stick with the call, which was great for us, great for the Stealth.
Yeah, it was definitely an exciting game, but almost all of them between the Mammoth and Stealth really have been. It's crazy when you just look at the history between those two teams back when they were Albany Attack. It's just they're always tight, they're always chippy. They're always fun to watch. Almost. There's some I haven't enjoyed nearly as much. One thing that actually, I'm just throwing this out there, that really drove me nuts is on the feed, why do they have to show 3 replays of every single goal? The play's back on and there's other goals being scored and they're so busy still showing the replay from the other one, you've missed the entire play. It was, for a fan watching at home, it was very frustrating.
I kind of get that for the people in the stadium, in the arena. They want to see the goals. They may want to see replays and stuff like that. And for the people there, you want to watch the game. The game's right there. You want to watch the replay. It's up there. So they get the best of both worlds. Because the NLL a lot of times is not actively televising the game. They're just taking the video screen feed and broadcasting that. That's when we kind of get screwed, and we get to watch the guy dancing in the dance competition instead of watching the play on the field.
Yeah, that definitely happens. But in this one, it also think they were very slow to get the replays up. So in those breaks between plays, you didn't have the replay going. You had fan shots or something, and then game starts back on, and up there's the replay. But that's just my little rant. But overall, I felt like the Stealth were looking a little bit flat in the first half. What did you think, Tyler?
Definitely came out slow, but I think in all the Mammoth games to that point, the Mammoth had come out really great in the first quarter. So the Stealth were holding on, I think, to ride that initial wave that the Mammoth come out with. And like Graham said, they never led, but they also never quit. And it was just a situation where they played just good enough to win. I keep summarizing the Stealth offense right now that they're taking the opportunities given to them, but not necessarily creating what they want. So to get a win is great, but they're not showing me anything to be an offensive threat yet. They can move the ball and get goals, but when the defense has a lapse. They need to run an offense and be more aggressive and to get to the next level for this year.
Yeah, one thing the Mammoth definitely suffered with in that fourth quarter was they really had some badly timed penalties. I mean, they had a lot of penalties throughout the game, but it just in that fourth quarter, when it counts the most, it was very painful to see some of the things they were doing that was putting them in the box, especially when you have too many men and things like that, delay of game. Frustrating.
One thing I noticed in this game was Adam Jones. He seems to be playing really well. I mean, he's not like anybody questioned his Rookie of the Year award the other year, but he looks like he's really ready to become one of the offensive stars in the league. He looked really comfortable out there. He just looked like he was in control, and I mean, he's leading the league right now in scoring. But given that Colorado's played 2 more games than anybody else, that's not too surprising. But he looked as if he's certainly ready to stay right up at the top for the rest of the season.
He does seem very comfortable in that role. And, I mean, we've all seen it with some really top players that in their rookie season, they just light it up, and then the next season they have that sophomore slump. Some of them come out of it in the third season, some don't, and we don't really hear from them again. So Jones is definitely a strong cornerstone. It'll be interesting to see what they do with him.
Yeah, Jones came out of junior as the best player going, but he had a knee injury, so he was actually slowed down, and his NL debut was really impressive considering that. He wasn't coming in at full strength, and he's returning to the dominant force he was in the junior ball for, I think, the Orangeville Northmen.
Yeah, I heard a lot of people overlooked him because of his injury, that they thought he was too much at risk, which is why the Mammoth felt like they really stole him, kind of snuck him out of the draft. So he's definitely had an impact. It's one move that Govets made that I don't think any of us can argue with.
One disappointing thing about that Vancouver game was the attendance. And this has been discussed to death on the Wing Zone message boards anyway. Less than 3,000 people for that game. Now they had just under 5,000, I think. The place only holds 5,500, so you're not expecting 10,000 people at these games. But less than 3,000 people for the second game. Now it's a Friday night, and I guess Friday night attendance tends to be lower than Saturdays. But 3,000 is pretty sad, and the number of empty seats there, just I wasn't too impressed. Considering we've been hearing about BC people talking about how Vancouver is this hotbed of lacrosse, and if any city in North America deserves an NLL team, it's Vancouver, and I was certainly willing to agree with them and say, I mean, they have the WLA as based around Vancouver. They should be able to get all kinds of people in for these games, and it just doesn't seem to be happening yet.
Yeah, it was the first game I knew there was a lot of freebies there, but I didn't know how many. I don't think it was 2,000 freebies. I had 5 free seats, that's why we went up to that game. But this game that people say, it's Friday night, it didn't start till 8, which I think was a concession to get people off work, get food, and get to the game, because you can't eat at that arena. There's 2 concession stands, and the lines are horrible. So get yourself taken care of and go to the game. And then people extended that to be, well, it started at 8. It was too late to take my kids to the game, even though it's really for the kids a lot of the time. So I think they only have maybe one more Friday night game. They're almost all Saturday games, and I don't want to compare the opening night with freebies and a Saturday to a Friday night game. It's the attendance was terrible. The section just as we looked at it to the right of the Colorado bench, it was empty. What you see on the camera goes right down to play, and there's just nobody there. It was terrible. But until they have a couple Saturday night games, that's what I think the benchmark for attendance will be. You want to do Saturday games.
Yeah, I know. I was very surprised at the attendance levels. I mean, for most of the reasons you guys have said, it's this hotbed. Everyone's saying that this is a better location, but even with the Mammoth, we know Friday and Sunday games are harder attendance. So hopefully they're going to rebound from this, but I think a lot of people will be watching that next game very, very close. See what they do.
Okay, I guess it's game number 3. Minnesota in Philadelphia, and I had these ones backwards. Minnie and Philadelphia played home and home games this weekend, and the away team won both of them. I called them the other way. I
Just like
think
I
you guys
picked
might
it.
have as well.
Easy.
Was it? Fair enough. Yeah, we'll get to that later, I suppose. But this game, hard to say that Minnesota really broke out of their slump. They had only scored, I don't remember what the numbers were, but there was like 8 goals in one game and 6 in the other or something. So they only scored 11 in this one. Obviously good enough to win. I didn't see this game. I saw the odd replay here and there and stuff, so I didn't see much. But Philadelphia is starting to look like, what did I call them? The almost comeback team. Because in all 3 of their losses, they were down by a bunch, and then they scored a bunch in the second half and in the fourth quarter. And in, I think, the Rochester game, they almost came back. They never quite tied it up. Against Buffalo, they were down by 5, and they came back to tie it, and then lost in overtime. And in this one, they came back to tie it midway through the fourth, and then ended up losing by 1. And then their other 2 games, they were very dominant. So I think Philadelphia's 2-3 record is probably not really indicative of how good the team might be.
I really enjoyed watching this game. This was a fun game. It was chippy. It was close for most of it. I thought the goaltending was pretty good. Both teams had pretty good ball movement. There were some exciting goals. There were some goals that seemed like they came out of nowhere. It was just good. Felt like the transition really made a big difference, and that I think when a team doesn't have good transition, it really stands out. And it seemed like both teams were doing pretty well on transition. Although I was kind of curious, did you watch the game, Tyler?
Yeah, not very often you get to watch a game at 9 a.m., but pulled it up on my phone and just carried it around all morning and watched the whole thing.
That was awesome. I mean, the announcer for it kept either miscalling what the refs were saying, or the refs kept changing their mind a lot. Did you notice anything, Tyler?
Yeah, it was a lot of references. He would see an arm go up, and so he'd say there's a penalty coming, and then it was either a dead ball, the ref was going to blow it in, or he was just doing a reset. He wasn't seeing the hand signal necessarily, but he was seeing arms up, and he was preparing for penalties that really weren't there, and kind of messed him up a little bit. But he works by himself. As Dave Wall's guys, he has no color guy. And the one thing I love about his games, though, is he doesn't have a color guy. He's all by himself. Yet every break, he'll get on Twitter and like have some interaction with people, and not just be sitting there on an island. Like, all right, I got 2 minutes to kill. All right, wait for the next whistle. All right, another 2 minutes to kill. No, he makes it interactive, and it was really cool.
I like that he does it between plays, not actually on plays. Which is what used to drive me nuts about the stealth guy, is he'd do it while the play was going on, and then they're calling stuff and there's penalties, and he's never even talking about the game. So, but it definitely was distracting, because I was doing a little bit of working and then watching some, and so him calling the reffing stuff was like, was the reffing really that bad? Because I didn't feel it was, but maybe I wasn't watching it at those times.
I didn't have any problems with it.
Well, it was definitely a good game. So this one was worth going back and watching again if you haven't seen it.
Yeah, I might have to do that. I have seen Dave Walls before doing games, and I imagine doing it by yourself has got to be tough, because you're basically just talking nonstop for 2 hours. Obviously during play it's not a problem because you're doing play-by-play anyway, but to keep going constantly and do all of the analysis and color commentary that the other guy normally does, when there is no other guy, then that's got to be tough. Next game, Toronto-Rochester. I actually didn't see all of this game. I saw the first quarter, some of the middle parts, and then the last quarter. but I missed the middle part where Rochester took the big lead. So I guess that was kind of good from a Rock fan point of view. Um, so in my prediction last week, I said I really wanted the Rock to win, obviously being a Rock fan, but I found it hard to bet against Matt Vince, and turns out I was right. And it wasn't even Vince. I mean, Vince was very good, as he usually is. I thought Nick Rose had a pretty decent game as well. But the Rochester defense is just stifling. They just couldn't, like, the Rock just couldn't get anything going. They were passing around and around and around and around, and then before they realized that they were out of time. They were just nobody. Some people would try to cut in the middle. They'd get either squashed, or somebody would come take their place. Whatever. There was just nowhere to shoot. And by the time they managed to get a shot, all they could do was hit Vince in the chest or miss the net entirely. So it wasn't even so much Matt Vince as the Rochester D. Did you guys see this at all?
I did not watch this one.
No, I already had one game in. I had to save my time for the stealth game that was coming up shortly after that.
One thing I noticed about the Rochester offense was Craig Point, and I think I made the point, that he made new contacts because he just seemed to be missing the net a lot. I think I was almost ready to tweet that at one point, and then he scored, so I decided not to tweet it. But even after that, there would be a lot of times where he'd have a pretty decent look at the net and just miss the net by. It wasn't by miles, but I think the number of shots that he missed the net on versus the number of ones he actually hit Rose. He probably missed more than he hit, so that seemed to be a little strange. Next game, I watched most of this one actually. Calgary, Vancouver, and this I thought was a lot more of what we expected the Roughnecks, to look like. They certainly didn't look that good in the Edmonton game. They didn't look great in the Toronto game a couple weeks ago. This is more what I expected them to look like. Vancouver, again, like you said in the other game, Vancouver never gave up. They just kept trying to score, and they scored a couple goals, but they just couldn't get any momentum because anytime they scored, Calgary would score almost right away. Tyler, I assume you watched this one?
Yep. Whole way through there. It was second game in 2 nights for both teams. But the Stealth had to travel from Vancouver to Calgary, and Calgary just had to come down from Edmonton, which I imagine they could even take a bus down after the game and all sleep in their own regular beds and just wake up in Calgary Saturday morning and get ready for the game. I think that may have had a slight factor, but not too much. The biggest factor for me is that Kyle Sorensen, he went on the injured reserve for the Stealth this week, and his leadership on the back end could have calmed a couple situations. And so as soon as I knew that he was on the injured reserve, we did our picks last Monday because when we record, and he went on injured reserve midweek, and I was thinking, well, I would not have picked Vancouver to win in Calgary without Sorensen, and it kind of played out that way. There was some defensive lapses that just wouldn't have happened. Friday night and Saturday night, the Stealth rotated in new kids just to it's a chance to see what they have, and it's risky with the shorter rosters in the NLL to be trying out players at any point, any position, and it kind of burned them this time. The biggest thing also for Calgary is their fast breaks when they're on the short bench side, when they don't have to cross midfield. They send Dan Dobie out the door. He catches a pass on a fast break and he converts. I want to say every time. It may not be every time, but it's like 80%, something huge. And so they get these fast break goals, get huge crowd energy from it, and they really were able to do that and kind of quiet the Stealth down, and the Stealth never got back into it late. They battled back and forth, but in the fourth quarter when the Calgary finally pulled away, they really pulled away and shut the door, and the Stealth, they just couldn't get hold them from getting the last couple of goals after it had been tied late.
Well, it looks like penalties definitely didn't help the Stealth. I mean, on the power play they went 2 for 7, but Calgary went 6 for 9.
Yeah. They don't get as many penalties when Kyle's in there yelling at them. So, yeah, 6 power play goals, fast break goals the other way. Calgary took all the advantages given to them and then some, and really took control of the game.
Next game, I don't think Melissa wants to talk about much. Buffalo 16, Colorado 9. Buffalo's starting to look a lot. I mean, obviously a lot better than they did last year, considering they were the one team that missed the playoffs last year, and they were very close to missing the playoffs the previous year. They haven't made a massive number of roster changes. Obviously, bringing in Ryan Benesh has been really big, but they're getting really balanced scoring from all over the place. Stainhouse is scoring, and Benesh obviously. You can never count out John Tavares. I get the feeling 10 years from now we'll still be talking about John Tavares. Williams and Culp and Dane Smith, and even Steve Priolo has 5 goals, and I don't know what his career numbers are, but I'm pretty sure 5 is right up there in terms of season high. Cosmo's having the season that they were hoping for when they got him a couple of years ago. I think he's played every minute of every game other than the opening loss to Philly. So yeah, I mean they're just looking like a really strong team. So Troy Cordingley's really had a big effect on that team.
Yeah, I don't want to take anything away from Buffalo because they were playing well, but the Mammoth were not giving them any challenge whatsoever. They looked flat. They were giving Cosmo easy shots to block most of the time. I mean, they weren't anywhere near him, or they were right at his chest. You know, and according to Sean Pollock on the Mammoth website, apparently they only had 4 hours of sleep before they actually played against Buffalo. So for whatever reason that happened, that there was delays in flights or something, they were apparently running on no sleep. And, you know, they have played 4 games in 8 days, so I don't want to say that's an excuse for them because they definitely seem to be trying to use it as one. But as we were discussing before we started recording, a good portion of the teams have only played 3 games. Some have played 4. Philly's played 5, and then you have the Mammoth who've already played 6 games in 4 weeks. So that definitely could be wearing on them. It could be wearing them out a little bit faster. But you'd also hope that it would start helping with some of the cohesion and gelling in the team. And it really hasn't. They really just don't seem to communicate very well. And it's really frustrating to me as a fan seeing how many shorthanded goals we give up and some of the lackadaisical play. There was one point where John Grant Jr. bobbled a pass, and he literally just watched Andrew Watt pick up the ball and run down the field and score. And it was like he never made any movement towards him or the ball. It was just, and it's not just him. They just kind of have no fire under them, no hustle whatsoever. And I understand if you're tired, but there wasn't even attempts. They were just flat and just sat back and watched, even though they're in the play. So it was just an ugly game.
Yeah, I wasn't able to watch any of this because it was the same time as the Stealth Calgary, Stealth at Calgary. So I saw the camo uniforms looked pretty cool, very unique. They're having a bunch of different uniforms in Colorado this year. It's really nice to kind of see that for the fans because fans really dig that stuff, in my opinion. I do.
The Western one that's coming out is really cool. I may actually have to pull it out of the closet to show you guys.
I've seen that one. That one looks really nice.
It incorporates the Colorado flag colors. Kind of looks like the old Denver Rockies hockey.
And the last game of the weekend was Sunday afternoon, and it was our second 15-8 game of the weekend, which seems rather weird. Philly over Minnesota. And you may have noticed, let me see if I can adjust this, I've got my Montreal Express jersey on today in honor of Tracy Koleski, who had a really good game for Philadelphia, I thought. And since I don't own a Wings jersey or a Bandits jersey or a Roughnecks jersey, I had to go all the way back to Montreal. Buffalo fans must be going, what the heck is going on with Tracy Koleski? Because he just didn't really perform at all to this level when he was in Buffalo. He was there for 2 years. Last year, I had the stats up here a second ago. I think he scored 10. I think he had 10 points in all of last year, and he had 5 on Sunday. So let's see if I can find it. What has he got now? He's got 20 points on the season, and there's only five games in. So yeah, so Buffalo fans can't be too pleased with what's going on there, but the Wings certainly are. Sorry, I'm losing stuff here.
Well,
Philly just dominated this game, and I don't have a lot more to say than it was just a total domination by Philly, really.
Yeah, Minnie looked flat. I really kind of felt like I was watching the Mammoth play, and especially since I really like when you have the barn-to-barn games and they're both experiencing the same potential issues. I think that's a lot more fair, a lot more balanced. I think when it's just one team has back-to-back games against 2 fresh teams, I really think is kind of unfair. And so to see how different both these teams looked from the first matchup to the second matchup was really interesting. Whatever Philly did looked really good. And like you were just saying with Koleski, I mean, maybe he's just fitting into the organization better. That Buffalo just wasn't a good fit for him because he's definitely a good player. We definitely saw it with Roughnecks.
Yeah, I watched some of this at the same time as the NFL playoffs were going on, so didn't pay super close attention, but I saw at least one goal by a little kid, Kyle Buchanan, the Stealth had last season, and to me, he's like a Jeff Zwicky reincarnated, a little righty shooter, just gets all these looks and angles that are incredible, and great hands when he gets in close. Fun to watch that kid run around.
Yeah, because Philly they took a commanding lead, and even though it was slow in the third, they just dominated, and Swarm just really, they looked tired.
The fourth quarter that Philly totally pulled away and they just ran down and constantly were ahead of the defenders, and so their looks weren't even that much of a challenge. They were just fast break dunks to finish the game.
Yeah, and Evan Kirk was pulled fairly quickly. Or no, not Evan Kirk. It was
Carlson.
Carlson.
Yeah, he was pulled. I think both games. The Saturday game, it was 3-1 in like the first 4 minutes, and he got the gate for Higgins to come in.
Yeah, Mammoth has been struggling with their goalies too. They keep starting Belanger and then end up pulling him after about 5 or 6 goals for Ward. Although Ward did start in one of this weekend's games.
Pretty sure he started Friday night.
Yeah, I think it was Friday.
Which is what they need to give him, that start and take out the fear that he's going to get pulled. Just let him play. Pick a goalie and go with it. Switch him every game. They're going to be thinking about when am I going to get pulled more. They're going to think about making saves. It's a terrible situation to be in for a goalie.
It seemed to work out a couple of years ago with for the Swarm with Kirk and Carlson, but for the most part they would give Kirk the start and he'd play the whole game, and then the next time they'd give Carlson the start and he'd play the whole game. And I'm sure there were times when somebody didn't play that well and they swapped them mid-game, but for the most part they were basically platooning the two of them. Whereas in the Mammoth situation, it's almost like we're going to stick with Ty Belanger as our starter regardless of anything. And if he sucks, then we'll take him out in the first quarter and we'll put Ward in as the backup. And they keep going back to that. And I don't think Belanger has lasted till halftime in any game yet.
No, he definitely hasn't. And I think initially that was the plan, was 2 strong goalies and they were just going to swap them back and forth however was needed. And especially on the back-to-back games, one start the first night, one start the second night. And so that may have been why Belanger was put in on Saturday and Ward started Friday. But it's And unfortunately, it's not even just the goalies, because they have both been struggling a little bit in certain instances, but the defense is just not there for them. They're giving teams entirely too many one-on-one opportunities, two-on-one opportunities, three-on-one opportunities. I mean, there was one point in the Bandits game that, because the Mammoth keep getting hit with too many men, and they, I swear, had like 7 players on the floor at one time, and they didn't get called, but it didn't help them either. It didn't make a dent at all. And if your defense isn't going to be there for you, or you're often a man short because somebody's down the floor trying to whine to the refs, then it's just not good for your goalie. So it's not even just that either of them are truly playing bad; they just have no support. And Belanger could be having his mind messed with a little bit from this constant pulling, putting in and pulling them right back out. So.
Okay, let's move on to our predictions from last week, and Tyler's been looking forward to this, I think. Tyler had an outstanding week last week, 6-1, and if you had known about the Kyle Sorensen thing earlier, you might have been 7-0. That's pretty impressive. So,
I totally tweeted out Saturday morning. It's like, Sorry's out. I don't see the stealth wing in Calgary, so I'm gonna put an asterisk next to 6-1 and say that was nailed it.
We'll call you 6.5 and 1/2. Melissa and I both went 4-3, which is not too surprising considering we had identical picks.
It's better than I have been doing.
That was definitely your best week, yes. So overall, Melissa is 7-11. I'm at 11-7, and Tyler takes the lead with 12-6. So not bad. This week we have 3 tough ones. At least I thought they were tough ones. And Tyler, since you're in the lead overall, you can go first with your predictions for this weekend.
Sure. First game we've got Rochester at Buffalo, and I think it's Rochester's first road game of the season for some reason. Maybe they went to Philly. Right. I can't even. Yeah, but they haven't lost, so I have no reason to pick against them. I mean, Buffalo's very hot. They'll be at home, but it's not that far of a game for anybody from Rochester, and all the guys, actually it's closer for Ontario guys to go to Buffalo and Rochester. Let's go in there, and they've been there before. And I got Rochester winning. The second game, Colorado at Calgary. I haven't seen Colorado's roster move for the week or in what way they can implode, but I'm going to go ahead and pick Calgary. I can't see anything that Colorado could do to change my mind. Last game is Edmonton at Vancouver. Edmonton, I don't pick against the Stealth very often, but Edmonton's game right now, 3-0, stifling defense, offense that's got a lot of self-confidence after putting up several big games this year. They'll be good to go, and they'll take Edmonton there.
Okay, I guess I'll go second. The Rochester Buffalo one, I think I've said every week so far that I was going to pick Rochester because I couldn't bet against Matt Vince, and here I am betting against Matt Vince. Buffalo just looked really good this weekend. They look like they're playing with a ton of confidence. Cosmo's playing well. The defense is playing well in front of them. Their offense is all over the place. John Tavares was a healthy or semi-healthy, I suppose you could say, scratch this weekend, and they didn't seem to. I don't want to say they didn't seem to miss him, but they certainly won handily without him. So with him back in the lineup, I'm thinking Buffalo's just on a roll, and if anybody's going to beat Rochester, other than possibly Edmonton, I think it might even be. I think it might be the Bandits, so I'm going to go for them. Colorado, Calgary, yeah, like you said, until Colorado proves that they can. I guess they kind of did with the in the stealth game, but for the most part, they haven't proven that they can really play a full 60 minutes. And I see Calgary taking this one. Edmonton, Vancouver was a tough one. but I'm going to go with Edmonton as well for all the reasons that Tyler said. They just look too strong at this point. Melissa, it looks like you've changed yours 2 or 3 times while we've been talking. So, what are your final answers?
I agree with you. This was a tough one, and I have gone back and forth on Buffalo and Rochester because I can make a case for why either of them might win, and so I wouldn't be surprised if that one goes down to overtime. It's just a hard one to pick. I think both teams coming in off wins this weekend, they're going to be ready to play. They usually play a pretty good game. I don't think travel is going to play a factor like it does in some games. So I even earlier when I wrote them down, I waffled back and forth several times, and during the week I may still be waffling a bit, but we're gonna go with Buffalo. We'll see. For Colorado and Calgary, unfortunately I have to go with Calgary on this one. It's almost always a tough game between these two. I think Colorado might hold a slight advantage in Calgary. If not, if they do, it's by maybe a couple games. It's always tough, and so this is another one that Colorado might actually pull it out if they actually can play as a cohesive team and play more than one quarter. And that's been their biggest issue this season, is they're not playing as a team. The communication really seems poor, shots are off, things like that. And passes are just bobbled and completely missed. Like the guy didn't know there was even a chance the ball would be coming to him. So I think Calgary is just going to be able to really maximize, on their mistakes. And so unfortunately, I am dreading that game a little bit. Also looking forward to it because I'm hopeful that it's going to be a nice, tight, close game like against Vancouver. But we're going to go with Calgary. Edmonton and Vancouver, that was another one. It was really hard to choose. Vancouver definitely has a lot of potential, and as Tyler was saying, maybe Edmonton's just had a couple of soft games because of their opponent, but they really look like they're gelling. So I don't think it's just been their opponent. They really look like they're playing well as a team, and they really are kind of exciting what kind of potential they might have this season. Although it is very disappointing to see how few fans come and support them. So Edmonton needs to come out and see them because they're awesome. So I'm going to go with Edmonton.
All right. While you were talking, I was looking up the Calgary-Colorado matchups, and it's interesting. They've played 28 regular season games against each other, and they're 14-14. And in Calgary, they're 8-8. In Colorado, they're 6-6. So completely even down the line in the regular season. In playoffs is a different story entirely.
Yeah, they always knock us out.
They've played 6 games, and Calgary is 5-1. So as long as you're in the regular season, then it's pretty even. In the playoffs, I'm not sure I'd bet on Colorado in that case.
Yeah, playoffs have not been kind to Colorado, especially if they're playing Calgary.
I'm pretty sure Calgary and Edmonton is it the other way around, or is it? Let me just look that up as well. Yeah, it's the other way around in Calgary and Edmonton. Calgary is 23-5 overall against Edmonton in the 28 games they've played, but they're 0-2 in the playoffs. Where are we? Okay. Okay, I guess that does it for this show. Was there anything else that we missed that you guys wanted to mention?
No, I'm good.
Yeah, I think we covered quite a lot, even off topic.
This was definitely the busiest week of the season. I think there might be a couple of weekends coming up with 5 games, but I think I think 7 was the highest this season anyway. Yeah, so I guess that will do it for today's show. Shortly after this show is over, it will be posted at youtube.com. The easiest way to find it will be addictedtolacrosse.com, where we'll put up a link to the show. If you want to give us any feedback, you can send us email at feedback@addictedtolacrosse.com. You can also reach all of us on Twitter Melissa is Snow Kitten. Tyler is Stealth Dragon, and I am Graham Parrow, as you can see on the screen. We also have a Twitter account for the podcast, which is Lax Podcast. So send us any questions you like, or just give us feedback in general. We'd love to hear from you. We did get one question during the show, but it was in Arabic or some other language that I am unable to read, so apologies if you're an Arabic listener and wanted to ask about lacrosse, which seems unlikely, but is possible. Anyway, I guess that will do it for this week, so we will see you next Monday.
Bye.